1. I'm having a house built, but bought a TV during Amazon's Prime days. I had it sent to my grandparents' house to be stored until the house is done. The package never arrived, and after a couple of days, the picture from the delivery was on FedEx's site. I sent it to my grandfather, who recognizes it as his neighbor. He calls the neighbor, who claims that he ordered the same exact TV and didn't realize he'd opened mine. I did not ask him to contact the neighbor. The neighbor says his is coming in the following week and will give me his, as it's the exact same TV. A few hours later he says, "I called Amazon, who said for me to keep this TV and for you to call them so they can replace it." I tell him that my refund and replacement has already been denied multiple times, and that I was told to contact local authorities and law enforcement, but I would call again. The next morning I call Amazon, who tells me that my claim was denied again, and that I should still try to get my TV back since I know where it is. I call the neighbor, who is now saying he has to send my TV back when he gets his in. I tell him not to, that I want my TV even if it's open. He's an old dude, so I was using yes sir and no sir. I was trying to be polite, as he has my expensive TV. He hangs up and sends me a long text about how he has my TV and won't be giving it back. And I just said, "To verify, you're refusing to give me my TV?" He calls me back and says to stop harassing him. So I drive over to my grandfather's house, he's out of town, and call the cops. After some back and forth phone calls with the cops calling me and my neighbor, they come out. 4 cops showed up because this dude said I am committing fraud and cheating him out of a TV. After I showed the cops the texts where he says he has my TV, pictures of the box he sent me with my name on it, and where my refund was denied, they went to talk to him. He changed his story for the 5th time to say I already got a refund and that I'm trying to fraud Amazon. End of the day, I got my TV back, and the neighbor calls my grandfather. Grandfather calls me saying I had discredited him. He meant defamation. He says that I called the cops on his neighbor and cheated him out of a TV. The neighbor is claiming he won't get his package now because he was supposed to keep mine. This old dude was so entitled he thought he had a right to my TV. I don't even think he ordered one in the first place now. For those of you curious, the cops were only able to get it back because of our state laws. In most states, they are required to give the package back if the person it was addressed to contacts them. The "you can keep misdelivered packages" only applies if it was addressed to you in the first place. 2. My aunt thinks she did absolutely nothing wrong, so I figured I'd ask everyone's opinion. My aunt is Amy's aunt, and my uncle is her brother, Amy's dad. A little backstory to explain how this started off. I have a cousin, Amy, who has been very nasty over the years. She steals, she makes threats, and she gets off with it. Last year, she stole £150 from my grandmother. Then, according to my aunt, she chopped up the dog's fur as revenge for my aunt posting about her bad behavior on social media. My grandma claims she asked Amy for help cutting their fur. Amy has been especially nasty towards me and stolen from me for many years as well, and she isn't trusted within the family and is rarely invited to family events as a result. On to last night. It was my grandparents' emerald anniversary, so we went out as a family. In walks extra family members who weren't invited. This includes Amy. Amy sits at the opposite end of the joined tables, far from my aunt, and begins a conversation with my mother. My grandmother was overjoyed to see her. And then it happened. My aunt got up and started to leave. Stupidly, I asked her to stay and not be silly, but she was adamant. Amy went to say something, but my aunt raised her voice sharply. "You do not talk to me." Amy left at that point. My aunt then paced a bit before going to leave. My parents asked her to stay, but she didn't want to. I told them to just leave her be, but she did reluctantly choose to stay. Meanwhile, my other cousin, Asta, wondered if she was the issue. Asta changed her name due to past trauma. My aunt refused to call her by her new name. After Asta also left, we had a conversation in which I called Asta by her name. With complete venom in her mouth, my aunt spat out, "You do not call Tabitha Asta. Asta is my dog's name, and it is insulting to me that you would call Tabitha that." Completely uncalled for, as by that point I hadn't actually done anything except saying she should be allowed to leave. Asta's choice didn't involve the dog. The fun didn't end there, sadly. My aunt continued to make passive-aggressive remarks to Neil, my youngest cousin, for having invited Amy in the first place. Neil was in floods of tears. He had no idea my aunt would flip out the way she did. Their dad came in. I've spoken about my entitled uncle before, and he can be violent. While I didn't catch much of what was said due to all the shouting from everyone at the table, the gist of it is he told her to behave, and she refused to accept any fault. She kept talking and bad-mouthing my uncle and Amy and going on, knowing full well she was egging him on. Everyone at the table asked and pleaded with her to stop, but she refused. Continued to claim she alone was the victim of Amy's behavior. I even put on my authority voice and told them, "Stop it, both of you, you're behaving like 3-year-olds. Though a 3-year-old would have behaved better than that, and my aunt ignored me anyway. My uncle threatened to throw a glass at her before he finally left. By this point, Neil couldn't stop sobbing, so I got up and hugged him, and being drunk, I loudly said, "It's okay, Neil. Some adults can act their age." At which point my aunt said, "No, they cannot," thinking I was only referring to my uncle. I followed Neil outside and sat for a while. I told my uncle outright that he shouldn't have behaved like that in front of family and in the restaurant. I told him to get his anger sorted, but I did agree my aunt was out of line. I only went back in after she calmed down. Thankfully, the rest of the night was uneventful, although it's been quite ruined and everyone just wanted to leave. This morning, we get this message on the family WhatsApp from my aunt. "Just to make it clear to all of you, I was not drunk last night. I was drinking alcohol-free wine because I was driving. Also, I did not shout, I raised my voice, there is a difference. Nothing I said was untrue. I did not like being put in that situation, and all of you saw I was going to go home. It would have been better if low-life scummy druggies were not invited to family events. This way we could all have a good time without the drama." She then continued to say that her best friend agreed she didn't shout, even though her best friend also tried to step in and stop my aunt. My aunt claims my uncle invited her to fight outside, which no one heard him say, but he can get violent, so I can't say if that's true or not. My aunt has been asked several times this morning to stop talking about it, but she continues. Other uncle says nastiness on both sides. I said where and in what way have I been nasty? He could not answer. Funny how no one can answer, because I have never been nasty. My behavior is a reaction to others' bad behavior. Think on that one. I hate Amy, but it wasn't Amy who made the scene. It was Amy who stormed out. It wasn't Amy who raised her voice in the restaurant, and it wasn't Amy who egged on my violent uncle. Amy left the second things got tense. Thing is, no one can tell my aunt that she was in the wrong, because she will go on a year-long tirade of hate and anger towards them. She once fell out with my dad for 5 years because he didn't want her feeding her dog at the dinner table one Christmas. Everyone was embarrassed by what happened last night, but she still thinks she's done nothing wrong. I want to add here, no one knew Neil had invited extra people until they turned up at the door. It caused problems with the restaurant too. My grandmother was devastated about all of it and was trying to beg family not to leave. It was heartbreaking. 3. This was at the beginning of the pandemic, just before countries were beginning their lockdowns. The wife and I were visiting our families in our country of birth and had to rush back to our home country. The airline had cancelled our pre-booked flights and rerouted us via 3 other flights across various countries. This also meant that the seats we'd booked wouldn't be the ones we'd be getting. To say it was a nightmare of a journey would be an exaggeration. While the first flight was barely 3 hours, the second flight was 9 hours of being wedged between people in the center row, after a 10-hour layover, with just another 15 hours until we reached home, 5-hour layovers plus the final 10-hour flight. We tried our best to just suck it up in spite of not having slept for over a day. Our luck turned for the better on the final flight, as we were assigned a window in middle seat. Seating configured was 343 upon boarding. We realized that the aisle seat beside me was unoccupied. Overjoyed, I took the aisle seat while my wife took the window seat. We were barely able to keep our eyes open at this point, as we're looking forward to getting some sleep at last. All was going well until a mom boarded with 2 kids, an 11-year-old male, a 7-year-old female in tow. We'd seen them at the airport, and could tell this was their only flight, or at least their first. They were assigned the middle row of 4 seats between the 3 of them, just a few rows ahead of us. While putting their bags into the overhead bins, the mom was scanning the other seats and spotted the empty one by my wife and I. There was no way in hell either my wife or I were going to be seated next to some other person's child. Once the doors were closed and we were waiting to start taxi stage, her son starts loudly whining about wanting a window seat. In no time, the little brat starts crying and demanding a window seat. The passengers around him were clearly annoyed at listening to a freaking 11-year-old throw a tantrum, but were way too decent to say anything. Instead of telling her child to shut the fuck up, the mother encourages the son to go ask passengers if they'd be willing to give up their seat, while turning around and looking at my wife and me. I woke up my wife to inform her of what to expect and told her to stand her ground if the lady asked. When the flight crew came by to check our seat belts, they saw the woman standing up and told her to sit down and buckle up. We noticed her trying to say something to the attendant, but couldn't hear what was being said. Once up in the air and the seatbelt signs were turned off, the mother, once again, stands up to look in our direction. But I made sure not to make any eye contact. By then, the kid had settled down into his seat, but the mother was adamant on looking for some sucker to give up their window seat. Her plan was to get the son to sit somewhere else, while she and her daughter could lay down comfortably across the 4 seats. Since that didn't work, she chose to keep glaring at me every time she got up to go to the toilet. At one point, I smiled at her and got an even worse stare. Note to parents traveling with young kids: we get that traveling with kids isn't easy, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to have other people sacrifice their comfort to make your life easier. We all reap what we sow. 4. I'm a 42-year-old female and live in Copenhagen, but the rest of my family does not, so my sisters like to come visit for a few days every now and then to hang out and enjoy some sightseeing and good food. This happened in December 2019, so before 2020, which means a lot of people everywhere and no restrictions of any kind. My little sister, now 38, was here for a Christmas visit in December, and we were enjoying the lights, the sights, and some lovely Christmassy delights. It was a cold day, and we decided that we would visit a smallish cafe that makes really tasty and very beautiful all things chocolate, and have some of their seasonal hot chocolate, which was kind of pricey, but well worth the price tag. It was a salt caramel and clementine hot chocolate, lavishly decorated, by the way. You could get 2 or 3 kinds of pretty but regular hot chocolates too. But this one was their Instagram hot chocolate, if you know what I mean. My sister finds us a table, and I get in line to order 2 of these chocolate wonders. There is a bit of a queue, but it moves along fairly quickly. I get to the counter, and the goddess of chocolate at the counter asks me my very feminine name to call when my order is up, and informs me that it will be about 10 minutes. I go sit down and wait with my sister at the other end of the cafe, but very much still within hearing distance. So just about 10 minutes later, the male half of a couple appears and goes to sit down with his girlfriend 2 tables away from the counter. At the same time, my name is called. Now, I cannot see their table, as it is behind me, but my sister told me later that the girlfriend pointed at her chocolates immediately, and the man more or less sprinted up to get them, when the woman who made the hot heavenly drinks has her back turned. I walk up there, and my drinks are, of course, gone. One of the chocolate goddesses comes over with the next order and calls a name. I ask where the order for my name is, and she said that when she looked over her shoulder to check, she assumed I had gotten them because they were gone. A chocolate god interjected that he saw a man take my order and point to the table with the thieving couple, who were busy taking lots and lots of photos of the drinks. The goddess went over with me in tow and asked what they ordered. They had ordered regular hot chocolates, but the girlfriend had wanted these, when she saw them in all their glory just sitting on the counter with no one to claim them for at least 5 minutes. And so she thought it didn't matter if they took them instead. They were unclaimed for 5 friggin' seconds, lady. The goddess explained that these drinks were not theirs and to wait for their order. "No, they're ours now," the girlfriend exclaimed, and pulled the finder's keeper's card all while looking triumphantly at me. The goddess asked the guy which name he gave at the counter and claimed he gave the same as my name, hence the mix-up. So I asked him what name was called. Surprise, surprise, he could not answer. Now the girlfriend was getting upset and sat there saying "no, no, no" over and over again, while the guy asked if I could not just order new ones. Since clearly they had made a mistake and the drinks were already on their table. Why, so you can steal those too? The goddess asked if I wanted those specific 2 drinks or she could maybe make me some new ones. I asked if the couple would be allowed to keep the mouth-watering morsels of goodness if I wanted new ones, and she said yes. Well, then of course I wanted those specific drinks. And now the girlfriend was visibly crying. The goddess took the drinks away and gave them to me. As we were walking away, I inspected the drinks and told her she better pour these away and make new ones, because 1, they were now cold, and 2, there were tears in one of them, and though I enjoy salt caramel, that level of salt was a bit much. She grinned and took them away and made me new ones that were served at the table. My sister and I agreed that these were the best hot chocolates we had ever had. We enjoyed them loudly, while the thieving couple stared daggers at us. 5. So I live in an apartment in the city, and we have our own parking lot, which is great, as there are little to no parking spaces nearby. Up until a year ago, the individual parking spaces were not labeled, so sometimes people would leave just enough space for your car not to fit in between. My next-door neighbor, she's in her 40s, I think, who is the Karen of this story, would constantly do this, which would drive me, my dad, and most of our neighbors insane. Especially since there was a section of the parking lot where you could fit 2 cars and 2 sections where you could fit 3. She even hit my car a few times, which I personally never saw, but I did see my car paint on her car. My car is the only one of that specific color in the entire parking lot. For some background, I'm 20 years old and female, and I got my driver's license in January 2022, when I was 18. Now, I may be somewhat inexperienced, but I damn well know how to fit my car into tight spaces, especially since my school's parking lot was also unlabeled and teenagers absolutely do not care to leave space for someone else to park next to them. And my classes often didn't start until 9 or 10 a.m., so by the time I would get to school, there would either be no or really, really tight spaces left for me to park. In conclusion, I know how to fit a smallish car into a very tight space. Back to the story. For 10 years that we lived in that apartment, we've had a problem with Karen and her parking, her dad too. She drives a large SUV while my dad and I drive a station wagon and a coupe, respectfully. Karen loved to park in the part of the lot where you could fit 2 cars, but since she's a bad driver, she is really, I've seen her drive, and an asshole, she would constantly park in a way that you could maybe fit a motorcycle next to her on either side. The same was with her dad, up until the individual parking spaces were labeled. Her dad would actually park between the lines, and you could fit a car next to his, which was surprising, but not Karen. She continued to double park. She even parallel parked a few times, taking up 3 parking spaces. After a few months, she started parking a bit better, sometimes over the line, but not in a way that my dad and I had problems fitting our cars next to her. Now, my dad and I can be extremely petty people, so even before the parking spaces were formally labeled, my dad and I would occasionally park as close as possible to her car, so she couldn't get in as easily. But you see, my dad's a big guy, 6'2", 200 and some pounds, so he couldn't possibly park as close as I can and still be able to get out of his car. I, on the other hand, am 6 foot and a measly 130 to 140 pounds. Basically, I can fit into and get through extremely narrow spaces with ease. Karen is a few inches shorter than me, but at least 30 pounds heavier, so my dad parking next to her would just be an inconvenience. But me parking next to her, as close as I can, means she has to enter through her passenger side door. I've seen it happen a few times, since one of the windows in our apartment overlooked those particular spaces. It was hilarious every time, and she couldn't say a word to us because she got herself in that mess. Last year, after I left for college, and I left my car at home, and my dad drove my car more than his. When I would go back home for the weekend and holidays, Karen wouldn't know which one of us drove the car last, and she didn't have the guts to berate my dad. But I'm certain that she would try to berate me if she ever saw me getting out of my car. For actual years, I have waited for the perfect opportunity to completely block her from getting into her car. And lo and behold, a few weeks ago I was coming back from my boyfriend's house, and I saw her car was over the line on the driver's side. The parking lot was half empty, but I gladly squeezed my car in reverse. She never parks in reverse next to hers, to the point where even I had trouble getting out. I even had to fold my side mirror so she doesn't rip it out while backing up. This would inconvenience her, because she would, yet again, have to get in from the passenger side. But when my genius of a father came back from work, he, as he told, wanted to park closer to the entrance, but caught a glimpse of my car and the proximity of it to Karen's, realized what I had done, and proceeded to back into the space on the other side of her car, as close as he could without damaging her side mirror, completely blocking her in. He entered the apartment and started laughing, asking me if I did it on purpose, and informing me of what he had done moments prior. The only part of this story that I regret is not seeing Karen's reaction to her situation in the morning and trying to get into her car. On the bright side, I don't think I've seen her park over the line since then. Maybe she learned her lesson after a whole decade. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 131. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, then you can click on the link in the description. That will take you to my Patreon page, and you can support me there for as little or as much as you like a month. It is very much appreciated, helps pay the bills. You can also get yourself some awesome Hellfreezer merchandise, some t-shirts and mugs and various other things. And you can make donations on a more one-off basis, because I do understand monthly support is a bit much. These are difficult times. Hence why I've started banging on about this in every video. But you can also make donations during streams or videos like this one on a more one-off basis, if you'd like to do that too. Every penny is appreciated, and it does help pay the bills and buy food and various other luxuries like that. Okay. Now, let's see. I don't think there's any... No, there's no shout-outs just now. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... What is the most disappointing initially, but ultimately surprising experience you've had with a business? I'm going to talk about a recent experience I had. About 6 months ago in February, I bought a heater. I won't name the company, but I bought a heater to heat the house, because central heating is very expensive, so I found the heater was more cost effective, and it is, and it lets me heat up just the room that I'm in at the time, and it does a good job. I was happy with the heater for the most part. It rattles a little bit when I first start it up, but that's just for a few seconds, then it runs as normally, so I thought, okay, that's fine. It's maybe just a little bit of plastic on one of the fans. That's fine. That's okay. And it worked fine. From then until last week, when I turn it on and I smell burning. Not the kind of heat I was looking for. And so I turn it off. And I think, I better unplug that. And, well, confession, it was the next day when I unplugged it, but no power was going through it, so it's fine. So I go to pull the plug out, and it takes a bit of effort to get it out. So what had happened is, the plug had started melting. Whatever was wrong with the thing, it started melting. It had even partially melted the socket that it was plugged into. Thankfully, the socket's fine. There's still a little bit of a smell of that awful burned plastic, but it's fading. and I'm still able to use the socket itself. But I contacted the seller. I said, hey, I bought this thing in February, and bad things have been happening. And I sent them a picture, and I don't know if the sending the picture is what did it, but the message I got after sending the picture was, oh, absolutely, we'll arrange for a refund, and even for it to be picked up. And minor inconvenience getting like a delivery time on the pickup day, but I did eventually get a text from the company that morning. They could have told me I'd get that text, but anyway, I did get a text from the company, so I didn't lose too much sleep over it. Got it picked up very quickly, and I ultimately purchased a replacement, not from the same company. The thing about this is, you go on, you'll see items that are all identical but with different names on them. Well, it turns out this heater is one of those. It wasn't at the time I bought it, and the reason I bought it is because it wasn't one of those, because it was literally only one of that model listed. But in looking for a replacement heater, I ultimately went with an Amazon Basics one, and so far happy with it, we'll see. And there's so many variations of the heater that I had replaced, the faulty one I had sent back, with different companies' names on it, and that wasn't the case before. So yeah, I wish that had been the case last time, because I wouldn't have wasted my money on it, but got my money back. Spent a little more money, got a replacement. It seems to be doing actually a better job. There's one feature missing from it. It doesn't have a temperature display, like telling you the temperature of the room on it, but it does tell you the temperature that it's heating to, so that's fine. Not the end of the world, but that's fine. I need to buy a proper thermometer anyway. So that's my story. If you feel comfortable sharing, I'd look forward to reading yours in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. I'm actually a little bit late to start the weekend stream, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.